Welcome to The American Spectacle, a podcast dedicated to the art of American dance, exploring the past, present, and future of dance, and discussing ways to re-engage communities, young people, in the most American of all arts, dance.
Before we begin, what if one drink could carry the weight of a lifetime? The Dressing Drink, a memoir by Thomas King Flagg, peels back the layers of an orphan's legacy, blending beauty, heartbreak, and hard truths into one unforgettable story. The Dressing Drink, available now wherever books are sold.
I'm Tom Flagg, host of The American Spectacle. I'm a longtime arts supporter and arts advocate of the art of dance. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Carol Cusack, all the way from Ireland. She'll inspire you with her great stories of show business in the old country. Carol, look who it is. This is so exciting. all the way from Ireland.
All the way from Dublin, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that in our conversations, we've had a lot of discourse about your early show business upbringing and dance and how America may have inspired you. Maybe you could talk a little bit to that.
Oh gosh, you know, we've talked before how I absolutely adore America. And I love the American people, and I loved my time in the States. It's just second to none. I still dine out on some of my stories, which may not be going to air, but anyway, yeah, at a very, very early age, my family was, always encouraging us, to watch, the Gene Kellys and, the Unsinkable Molly Brown. I always loved that movie, all those American spectacles, Oklahoma. Oh my God, I loved that. And I have to tell you a very funny story about Oklahoma. I came home from school one day. I was educated by the nuns. Some of them were lovely, some of them were quite wicked, but anyway, we'll go with lovely for the moment. And I was in a very, very famous choir called the Little Dublin Singers. And oh my God, the education I got in that choir was absolutely second to none. Discipline. If you were caught yawning during a rehearsal or anything, the nun would come and she would stick her 3 fingers in your mouth and say, "Now, dear, open your mouth that wide when you're singing." How would that go down nowadays? But that is the truth. But my parents, my father in particular, and my father's family, his brothers, were very theatrical. My uncle Kit performed as an Abbey actor in the National Theatre, the Abbey Theatre. Wow. He was part of Our Lady's Choral Society. He was always singing opera and very encouraging if you had any bit of a note in your head at all. But I think, the musical theatre, going back to Fiddler on the Roof, Hello Dolly, all of that fantastic spectacle as a young girl sitting in front of a black and white telly, because we didn't have color back then, and you were still enthralled in the magic and the rhythm of it and the spectacle that was America. Back in the day in Ireland, I'm talking about in the 1960s stroke 70s, anybody who went to America, nobody came home because it was emigration. Back. You were gone. So, the thought, and I didn't even know at this stage that perhaps I might cross the water to get to the States. I mean, what a sensation that could have been. And thank God it did transpire. But yeah, so my father in particular was very much the encouragement behind my early music. And he was the first person who brought me to an opera. And we weren't a very operatic kind of a family. In other words, it was a big deal to go to the opera in Dublin back then. It was very much for the rich and famous and the sophisticated. So to have a child of 10 rock in, because my father had got to know the man on the door was the first cousin once removed from somebody or other he knew. And Carol got in free and sat there and looked and saw lighting and glitter and glam and dancing and music. And the very funny thing was, the opera I went to see, actually, I forgot to say it, was The Tales of Hoffmann by Offenbach. And the famous duet from that is the Barcarolle. And I was learning that in private singing lessons. And my music teacher thought it would be lovely for me to see it. And of course, it was just amazing. And the funny thing about that was the soprano in that performance was Mary Sheridan. And years and years and years later, when I joined Jury's Irish Cabaret, Mary Sheridan was the lead soprano, and I got to tour coast to coast with my goddess of theatre. But I'm just going back, I'm rewinding the tapes there now, because I'm talking about Oklahoma and the spectacle that was that show. And we saw it as a choir. But I went home and I said to my parents, guess where I'm going? And they said, where? And I said, I'm going to Oklahoma, thinking I was actually, flying and going to Oklahoma. But eventually I got there, and I still have a letter, because, there was no mobiles or anything like that. I have a letter written to my father to say, hey, Dad, guess where I am? I was in some high school performing with Jury's Irish Cabaret, actually in Oklahoma. And it was just amazing, the connection from a very small young girl to eventually getting to the big city and seeing New York, Chicago, all the fabulous places that were only dreamt of, that you'd come home from. People who emigrated back then didn't normally come home. So that was my earliest memory, was really my father and my Uncle Kit and that encouragement. But it all came from America, hell surprise, as you would say. Not a surprise at all. I mean, it was literally zoned into our living rooms, and you lived and you ate every step that they took, every note they sang, every light, every bit of probably fake jewelry. But, as a child, you were influenced by that. And I think America back then was the biggest influence on me personally, not only from a singing and a music point of view, but from rhythm. You got rhythm. And so I went to Irish dancing, traditional Irish dancing, where you stood with your hands by your side and your carriage, and you kicked your legs as high as you possibly could. And, you brought home the bacon, as they say, you brought home the silverware. And that was fantastic, because you learned rhythm. So later on, when I, started to do jazz ballet, it was the basic rhythm of the Irish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That all comes back to you and stands to you. So that was a huge influence for me. And then I was actually doing Hello Dolly the year that Riverdance was on TV, and I called my dad on the phone, in a public phone, in a pub in town, last night of the show, and we had the après party. And I said to him, hey, Dad, are we winning? Are we winning the Eurovision? Because Ireland, the Eurovision was a Europe only song contest, not even singing, but song contest. And he said, never mind what's happening in the song contest. Wait till you see the act in the middle. He said, it's Irish dancing gone wrong. They're throwing their arms up and legs, because we were very traditional, what we would probably called shamnos, which is the very old-fashioned type of Irish dancing. But like Michael Flatley brought that to the public and went on, and it's still, I was in Grafton Street today and I passed the Gaiety Theatre, and what's on for the whole summer? Riverdance.
Wow.
So there you go. So, I think that could have been 30 years ago.
Yes, it was. I remember seeing it at Radio City, and it was jammed packed. But to see Riverdance at Radio City was really something. And then, of course, he spun it off in about 5 different iterations. and
That's right.
Lord of the Dance and all the others. And wow, he's really kept that going. But it
He
does,
sure has, and
it,
has developed it into Lord of the Dance. And now here you have some Irish pubs that have traditional Irish dancers. I'm not going to say capitalizing because that gives a wrong impression, but illustrating what modern Irish dance is to smaller communities, not on the big stage, but, small pubs, small theatres. Locally here where I live, there's a very nice theatre, and they put on a lot of Irish spectacle like that. But they're traditionally trained, but then they develop, they learn to use their body rather than be very disciplined. But my God, are they athletic? They are
yes.
so athletic. It's incredible. They watch their diet, what they eat, their exercise programs, all of that. They have a team behind them. And it's hugely competitive, to be on the stage dancing now. And I mean, it's in the world. Look at America, Japan, all of Asia, Africa. My God, have you ever seen such rhythm in your life? And they are doing Irish dancing, and they get it. They really get it. So I guess from a very small child, it was American spectacle, then going on to opera, and then touring the States. I mean, we opened in Carnegie Hall. What an amazing privilege it was to play at Carnegie Hall, and then in the Boston Symphony Hall. But, small schools as well, small high schools, we exposed ourselves to everybody, Irish American, and just gave a little bit of Irish culture hopefully to the States.
Well, it certainly has lived on, but, I appreciate what you're saying about the new style of, I wouldn't even call it new, but the change in Irish dance. We were talking about that recently, but it's really world-class athleticism, and it's unparalleled. But being able to take different forms of dance and intertwine them, hybridize them, has been a passion of mine for many years, especially ethnic dance, that you can put different strains of ethnic dance together. Been very successful at doing that. But I love the early stories that you can. I remember when I first saw my father in Hello Dolly on Broadway with Merman, and they didn't have mics. There were no mics then. Nothing was mic'd, and you hit your mark and you hit the back wall, and Merman was particularly good at that. But that's what everyone had to do. There was no head mics. There was nothing. Yeah, there was nothing but just being able to project and 6 times a week.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And twice on a Saturday. We call that here, projecting your yard voice, when you're out in the yard in school and everybody's shouting. So, yeah, we do that here as best we can. But yes, I understand. And I have to tell you about this now. I'm going from one thing to another. We had a show on the radio called Dinjo, and Dinjo was a famous old Irish dancer. I shouldn't say old, he's passed away now, but he had Irish dancing on the radio. Now, not only, you never saw anything.
Wow.
But if you turn on the wireless and you could hear it, and really and truly, the vibrations, the vibrations of the rhythm on a board, it was just out of this world, absolutely out of this world. And it kind of, even now when I think about it, gives me goose pimples, to think that was all Irish. And there's a huge now development in introducing Irish dancing, Irish culture on a bigger scale into the national schools to give Irish children more of a sense of where their roots are, where they come from, an opportunity to have a look and see, is it something, that they might like to do. It's not compulsory on the school curriculum. It's offered as an extracurricular activity. But it's going back to when I can remember listening to the radio. Couldn't see a thing. You could just hear the tapping of the feet, And I remember when I was learning Irish dancing, there wasn't the high technology of the kind of shoes you wore. You know, now it's full of tap, you know, full of steel
Hard shoe.
toes and exactly,
Right.
yeah. And that, like, that's new technology to the States. It makes everything so much more competitive when you have this as an accessory.
Well, there were great tappers. I mean, I have such a wealth of experience with watching tap in America, but there was a wonderful tapper called Brenda Buffalino. And Brenda would work on metal. There actually was a show which brought tapping on metal, and that once it hit that sound, then it was put through a computer and it was changed. So it has pushed out in a lot of different tap dogs. Tap Dogs was the name of the show. That they did a lot of that. But of course, American tap comes from African culture and Irish culture put together.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, if you look at, you know, Ireland has changed a lot since I was sort of on the circuit, on the professional circuit. But there's such diversity now with different nationalities. And you note, if you see children in particular dancing at the end of a school term, you will see the Black African children have got so much rhythm and soul, you know, and they adapt to the Irish. I'm not going to say tap dancing, the Irish hard dancing, you
Yes.
know, the hornpipe, for example. They just have it in spades. You know, they'd give any Irish kid a run for their money. But it is great to see all nationalities enjoying the rhythm.
Right. But, you know, there's still a magic. I mean, one of the reasons, the many reasons I love Ireland include the sense of culture, the depth of culture that is shared by so many people. We're now losing that in the United States. The sense of family, the sense of community, the sense of faith, which still have always existed there, but still exist while the world, it seems, is becoming compartmentalized and losing so much. And they're losing it in Ireland too, but the core is still there. And that's something that I admire.
I agree with you. I think that as an island, we're quite a small nation, you know, Irish people. I know we have a lot of cultures now joining us from all over the world, but I think the core value of the family, it's just a very natural instinct to, you know, to look after the grandparents and the parents and to instill that value in grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren now, and they visit my mother, which is their great granny, and they have such respect. And she's still such fun with them. You know, she mightn't remember tomorrow that they visited, and she mightn't remember their names, but, you know, there's that sense of fun and that sense of she's still the matriarch in the family. And, you know, I guess, you know, you're talking about fundamental values and the core value of the family. You work on it. It just doesn't come natural. You have to pass it on from generation to generation. And I feel, thankfully, that isn't lost here yet. The family is the most important thing in the community, you know, in community-based activities, knowing your community. The school is a big community here, and everybody helps everybody else, you know, and it's still like that, but it's just fundamental, I think, to the Irish people. And no matter what you do, no matter who you're arguing with in your family, if somebody says a bad word about anybody in your family, you ain't that ain't going to be pretty. So yeah, I feel very lucky to, you know, to be part of a big family network, you know, to have gatherings of the clans twice a year, to just sit around the table playing the barron very badly, playing the tin whistle very badly, but singing and having the crack and talking about family life. We're all Dublin people, so we talk about Dublin, you know, in the rare out times, which is a great song. But really and truly, we're very lucky to have that. You know, my mother is 90, my uncle is in his 80s, and he remembers he remembers what Dublin was like when everybody lived in the inner city. There weren't the suburbs, and people going to different counties. Everybody was a dub living in the inner city in a lot of poverty too. But, you had people like Brendan Behan around, literally around the community. You had James Joyce. You had all of these fantastic, famous, wonderful, worldwide, brilliant people in your community in Dublin City. And people got to know them, got to go and have a drink with them, or 10, whatever. But listen to their writing and appreciate it. And that part of our culture is still very alive here. People, and Irish people are still interested. The Bloomsday week, the 15th of June, there's something on at lunchtime and evening time. You could spend your time in Dublin City going to lectures, going to theatre, going to shows. People are dressing up. People are, acting out Molly Bloom, and it's that we're interested. There's still a hunger for that here. And I feel, that organisations like Conradh na Gaeilge are doing a huge campaign at the moment to get the younger people in the schools to still manifest that interest in where you came from. So I'm hoping that in my lifetime anyway, the family will be the core and the community will be the next core to our family, and that everybody engaging together will instill those values in our kids and in my grandkids growing up. And hopefully we'll continue it on for a few generations to come yet, but it has to be worked on.
Well, I certainly, as you know, support that. And one of the magical aspects to me is still the innocence of the Irish children. And it's really not the case with technology here in the United States. But we so appreciate your time today. A little slice of the old Ireland, the new Ireland, and your magic. Thank you for bringing to us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. If you enjoyed today's episode, please join us for upcoming podcasts, where we'll speak to some of the most consequential voices in the dance world. For more information, you can go to my website, thomaskflagg.com. In addition, you can find me on all social media platforms. If you want to learn more about me and my unique journey, please check out my book, The Dressing Drink. It chronicles my early life and efforts to better understand my parents, both entertainers in their own right. I'm Thomas Flagg, and thank you for joining us today.